Hey everybody, welcome back to Post-Status Draft. Got another great interview in our agency journey series. And I'm talking with JJ Toothman, a member of Post-Status. And JJ, hey, thanks for coming on Post-Status Draft and talking about your agency journey story.
Hey, thanks for having me, Cory. It's great to be here. Really appreciate everything you do for Post-Status and for the WordPress community. So I'm happy to be, a member of both. So.
Awesome. Well, we've gotten to get to know each other over the last, I'd say, 8 months and hear about some of the work that your agency does. And it's super, super exciting. But can you tell me about the agency, where it is now, team, clients, kind of work you kind of do?
Oh, there's my dog and wife.
Great introduction.
So my company is Lone Rock Point. And I am located outside of Boston, Massachusetts, in a town called Sudbury. If you know the Revolutionary War history, you remember the Battle of Lexington and Concord, and Sudbury borders Concord. I live about 5 miles from where Paul Revere was captured at the end of his famous ride to tell everybody the British were coming.
Oh, wow.
Lone Rock Point, we have grown it to 16 people. 12 of those people are full-time, and there's a handful of part-timers. We're distributed all over the place. I've got, some of us are in California, Texas, Michigan. There's a few people in around Grand Rapids. There's people in Florida. There's a few people around Asheville, North Carolina. And we definitely, adopted a remote first, virtual kind of organizational structure from the very beginning. When the pandemic happened in 2020, we didn't miss a beat. The people that we were working with, it just continued. It's weird to look back on that time and think about the ways that we were able to grow during that time in a period where so many small businesses were struggling. But I look back on that time and I think about we were going remote, being virtual. That wasn't a problem for us. We were ready to do that for the very beginning, and the people we were worked with we just kept working on it, kept asking for more from us. It was actually a period of growth for us. We probably went from, at the beginning of, spring 2020, we were around, 4 people and 4 or 5, and now we're 16. We became a WordPress VIP agency approximately 15 to 16 months ago. And we joined WordPress VIP as kind of a continuation of our work with the public sector. When I started my company in 2016, that we can talk about the genesis of that, but it was, had come from a federal government contracting world and in IT. I've been working for big companies like Raytheon, Perot Systems, Dell, and decided that I wanted to start my own company. Had this the proverbial entrepreneurial itch that most entrepreneurs feel, and just kind of wanted to try that out. So I started a service company, and I wanted to start working. There were 2 customers that I wanted to work with from the very beginning, and one of those was NASA, which is, it's hard for me to talk about my own journey and the work that we're doing without connecting to the long history I have working with NASA. So I used that relationship and that relationship capital that I've built, from starting working with them back in as early as 2001. So they were one of my first clients, and then one of my second clients, big clients, was Automatic. Some people over there that I built relationships with over the years came to me and said, hey, a lot about this public sector world, federal government contracting. Can you help us, with kind of get into that vertical? And so I helped them with some business strategy around that. I helped them with some IT security compliance things they needed to be aware of. And then that that work kind of matured a little bit and kind of ran its course a little bit. And then, as WordPress VIP, kind of solidified its standing, and it's got themselves into what's called the FedRAMP marketplace. They came to me and said, hey, you should, your company, we should continue working together. You should join the WordPress VIP agency partnership program. And that's something I did, specifically because of our shared interest in working together on public sector opportunities. And that's really what my company is doing right now. Is Lone Rock Point, we're definitely exploring that intersection of WordPress and public sector, predominantly the federal level of that. There's a lot of state and municipal stuff opportunities there as well. But we're, when you think of like WordPress and public sector, what I want people to come out of that connection with is Lone Rock Point. And so that's work we're doing with VIP and work we're doing with NASA. And it's going, we've been working on some projects with NASA for the past few years. And it's really rewarding work. It's good to feel like you're contributing to, we're not civil servants, but we're definitely kind of contributing to, putting the taxpayer dollars to work, being good stewards of taxpayer money. And we think WordPress has a role in that.
Excellent. Well, there's a lot here I want to unpack. But it's so compelling. Congratulations on your success. Congratulations on what you've done in the public sector to take WordPress there. I love hearing stories like yours and our other members doing good work in our world. And I think I've told you, I get to brag, hey, I know the people working on these projects, which is pretty fantastic. And taking WordPress to the enterprise but public sector space is really fantastic as WordPress grows. So, okay, I want to thank you for telling us kind of what Lone Rock Point does today. So I heard in there 2016. So that I had assumed, as we had talked before, because of the kind of work you're doing, you had been doing this particular agency type work for a long time. But wow, that's what's congratulations on your success. But like, it's a pretty fast timeline to be able to get to doing an agency to doing this kind of work, I think. But can you take me back, like before 2016? You said you were doing enterprise or public sector government contracting work. What were you doing before the agency?
Before I founded my agency? Yeah. So I was a software developer, web application developer. I got hired by Raytheon to work on a contract they had with NASA Ames Research Center back in 2001. Actually, the opportunity that kind of brought me into that world that's when they first started thinking about, like, what do they have to do about website accessibility? So they brought me in there to kind of help mature what they were doing around all that kind of stuff. And it's been interesting to see where I was thinking about this over the last couple of weeks. When I first started working at NASA Ames and started talking about website accessibility and looking at all the various websites and web applications that were running at Ames Research Center, which is one of the field centers that's part of the NASA enterprise. People were really resistant to it. They were trying to check the box on it quite a bit. They were just like, what's the minimum I have to do to, like, just check the box on this and so I can move on. Like, it really, the optics of how important that was, and it just being generally the right thing to do. Forget the whole legal requirements of it all. That really just wasn't cemented. And here we are, 20 plus years later, where that's kind of like at the core of what is happening, definitely in the public sector, but in the web in general. Just like this strong emphasis on making it accessible and available to everybody. you know, I saw how that started, you know, 20 years ago, and it was not the same temperature, both from developers, designers, project managers. You know, that whole thing has shifted in very positive ways over the last couple of decades. So I was a software developer there, working on various you know, web applications, internal business process type applications, looking at accessibility improvements, and then just kind of grew things over the years. Started rising the ranks a little bit, like getting opportunities to understand how government projects actually work, how procurement works, which is a pretty thing. I started participating in proposals that big companies like Dell were doing and responding to government RFPs, which are, you know, massive undertakings unto themselves. Understanding IT compliance and security regulations that exist in government, and really just kind of understanding how these government agencies and you know, as individuals, they kind of have their own IT ecosystems unto themselves. That's probably not, you know, unique to all various massive corporate enterprises. You know, we talk a little bit about the WordPress ecosystem now, but these federal government agencies, they all have their own ecosystems around IT, and then they're also operating in this big federal thing where there's kind of like this. Jennifer Palka just wrote this great book called Recoding America, and she calls this term friendly fire. So where there's like things where like the Office of the OMB and General Services Administrations and other offices and agencies within the executive branch and other parts of government are putting together governance and policy around IT and how the web should work. And it creates all this types of, you know, this guidance and guardrails that you have to adhere to. So that becomes like kind of a larger ecosystem unto itself. So, you know, starting to understand how to work within that type of, you know, those types of scenarios and guardrails and boundaries, and knowing how to interoperate it all just became, you know, something that I started gaining more experience with and more exposure to with. And, you know, I think it's been a big, you know, that knowledge is a big part of like why, you know, my company's positioned and why we've achieved some success, you know, working and gaining some credibility in parts of the public sector, and maturing our relationship with WordPress VIP, and, you know, expanding our own opportunities within NASA itself.
Yeah.
It's exciting. It's challenging, exhausting at times, but it's also exciting and rewarding.
Yeah, I can't imagine. So just for clarity, so you were working full time at Raytheon, or were you contract as a software?
Yeah, I was. So contract means you're kind of embedded. So you're a full-time employee, and you're a government contractor working on a contract that, you know, a company like Raytheon or Dell or Booz Allen Hamilton or Lockheed Martin has with the federal government to deliver services and capabilities that are part of their requirements. Okay.
That totally makes sense. So what was that catalytic moment when you're like, hey, I'm gonna do this for myself, I'm gonna start my agency?
Yeah,
what prompted that?
A couple of things. So I left NASA for a while, and I went and worked for a company, a music ticketing startup called Ticketfly. I helped them like basically create a network of websites for small independent music venues, and help those music venues talk about, you know, what shows were coming, how to buy tickets, you know, when the on sale dates were, and all the other, you know, all that content that is basically all about converting into ticket sales. And so I was, you know, with them when they were really small, and, you know, it was definitely this startup world, and that was really exciting. It was also a bad time for my life. I just had like my second child, and like my work-life balance was pretty bad. You know, working at a small startup like that. So I ended up going back to NASA, you know, and just trying to like find my footing a little bit. I also wanted to like leave California and relocate back to the East Coast, and I knew that was being in a place, a large organization like that would offer some flexibility like that. But then, I would say around a decade, 10 years ago, I started having this, I started having that entrepreneurial itch again. I started thinking about like how fun it was to, move fast at Ticketfly, and I wanted that feeling again. And so I started, I explored a couple like side hustles, some small little independent web projects. One of them was like a newsletter to help families spend more time outdoors. And they didn't really take off. They didn't really get some traction. And what I mean by that, it wasn't necessarily traction from a, where we're making revenue or gaining customers. We're just the balance of trying to do that type of initiative while, having a full-time job, and also like, having a growing family and all that kind of stuff. And then, but it was clear that, I was exploring something, and again, that desire to like be in more, control of my destiny, so to speak, and be entrepreneurial was something I just couldn't get rid of completely, and it wasn't happening within big companies like Dell in the way that I wanted to. I really wanted to be, in control of a lot of decisions that I wasn't in control of. And that's why people start their own things and be founders of companies. And I had dinner with a friend of mine who's also in the government contracting space. He's like, you've been thinking about, and he told me, he's like, you've been thinking about all these little product ideas, these digital product ideas, like, just start a services business, like, and that will satisfy your need or the desire you have to be entrepreneurial and, like, look at balance sheets and think about marketing and attracting talent and retaining talent and stuff like that. And he was right. He was like, you know what, that's a really good idea. And within 120 days, I like set the wheels in motion to, start Lone Rock Point. And I went from there. So it started in the fall I started the company in the fall of 2016. It was just me for, a year, and then it was like me and a virtual assistant for like another year. And I started under this umbrella of like digital transformation consulting. At the time, I was doing a lot of work with the public sector around cloud transformations. So people were operating applications in on-premise data centers and starting to make that migration into things like Amazon Web Services. And so I was working on a lot of change management type projects associated with that. And it all kind of just fit under this like big umbrella of digital and cloud transformation, which, to be totally honest with you, is too vague and too broad and borderline meaningless. If you ask 10 different people what digital transformation is, you're probably going to get 10 different definitions of it.
Yeah.
And so it was really hard to like, grow a services business that way. It was really just like me being a consultant at that point. And it wasn't until like I started niching down into, like, let's just do this WordPress thing. I was delivering, white papers and providing analysis of like what people should do with like their inventory of web applications, and advising them on what CMSs and what platforms they should be using. And a lot of times I ended up started like, making recommendations around WordPress oriented applications, sometimes just building WordPress sites, sometimes using WordPress as an application framework. In the time I've been with NASA, I've used WordPress with them in a lot of different ways. We've done it in a WordPress network multi-site kind of way for allowing smaller NASA missions and programs and projects to have their own websites where they all communicate what they're up to and what their findings are, and share what they learn with with interested stakeholders and visitors to their sites. There's been some internal things where NASA needed to like communicate various IT services that it had to various corners of the agency. So we did like a WooCommerce thing where people can go to a web application, a website, and just pick what IT services they want. Like I need some Amazon cloud storage or processing or EC2 units, and they could add all those things to a cart and then say checkout and do a checkout with that and start getting services provided to them that way. So and then over time it just became clear that like I keep recommending this, like there's growth opportunity for me here, and then niching down to being like we're going to be a more traditional WordPress agency is really when the growth started happening and the opportunity started becoming a little bit. And it isn't just like strategic consulting, it became the execution part of it as well, and the tactics part of it too. And the tactics and execution were all WordPress oriented for the most of the time.
Yeah, I'd love to hear these stories because you got, a big career in enterprise and public sector, with your Raytheon and NASA days, and then entrepreneurial itch hits. Okay, I want to do this. And then seeing, when you say NASA and WordPress, it just seems like those things should always go together, that's what really compelling to me is seeing WordPress more on the public sector, enterprise, and others really big institutions in the U.S. federal government anyway, probably around the world too, but that are starting to use WordPress more and more and leverage it and see that opportunity. So I love kind of how those intersection of things happen so that Lone Rock Point would kind of exist and grow. And then you hit I was going to ask the question, when did WordPress come into play? But you pretty much answered it. So like year 2, 3 or so, it seems like, hey, we're going to drill down. And then when you mentioned WooCommerce, that use case for an internal tool within a big organization like that to procure and get resources and things, that's so compelling.
Yeah, people just wanted that checkout experience. They wanted that experience of like, I want X, Y, and Z. I want to add it to the cart, and I want to tell you that I want it. And we just, WooCommerce has that option to, just do check payments, right? Which removes the credit card processing out of it. And so we kind of adapted that to, all right, we're going to send this order to somebody who can fulfill that order via this WooCommerce WordPress system. And it's using the WordPress ecosystem at its best, like using it almost kind of as Legos. And I want this part of it, I want that part of it, I want to glue them together in this way. And it's kind of a no-code kind of way around WordPress to solve some some very simple, narrow use cases. But my journey with WordPress starts way back in 2007. At my first stint at Ames Research Center, I was working with all these various scientists and researchers, and they're just like, I need a place to like publish my research findings and publish my data. And they all had the same requirements and needs at the highest level. It's like I just need a place to put it, and I want to be able to manage it myself in a way. And I don't know how to code. I don't know HTML. I don't have anybody on my team who knows HTML. And so that basically introduced the concept of like content management systems into all this back in 2007. And we were looking at things like wikis at the time, and then I discovered WordPress and around then, and just the user experience of someone just managing their content with that type of WordPress CMS. This is like version 2.0 of WordPress. Back when they added pages in addition to posts was the real thing that's like, this satisfies what everyone's looking for. They want an easy place just to log into. And some of them wanted to start blogging. Some of them wanted to start blogging without knowing that they wanted to start blogging. They just wanted to share what they know and tell their stories. And then back in 2007, I created. This is also the Web 2.0 era, where blogging was kind of heavy in the lexicon back then, and I did one of NASA's first official public blogs on WordPress, and I kind of grew with WordPress, from there. That led to the Ticketfly work, and so WordPress was kind of always in my DNA, even when I wasn't, it wasn't like a defined part of what I was, of my role description. But my role was in some cases to be strategic and provide advice and provide some roadmaps and, how do we do things? Give us some guidance here. And a lot of times I just said, like, well, you don't have to create a custom bespoke application for this. Just use a content management system like WordPress. Teach your users how to manage using WordPress themselves, and you go from there. So, and the WordPress ecosystem is what makes all that happen. I mean, there's all these different, there's all these different plugins and themes, and you just kind of integrate it all together, in a unique way, and you have a great solution architecture depending on how you put it together.
Well, you're talking kind of way back, but I remember a lot of the solutions that we have now didn't exist. So, big organizations were having to do like the internal resourcing that you're talking about. They'd have to custom code those things or build them because they didn't exist off the shelf. Then you fast forward and you could take WooCommerce, save. I can't even imagine how much time to kind of get to feature like, par with that. And then they can take that open source solution and then utilize it and just customize with a great agency like you all to figure out what their exact needs are. So it's great to see how everything has fast forward too. Well, we touched on this. I know we're going to have more conversations down the road, and I want to talk more about the public sector and enterprise. And I know we're talking, and we're going to have some great conversations in the next couple of months about this, because I know you're passionate about it, about the public sector and bringing WordPress to the public sector, but we'll save that for another time. I don't want to spoil too much of that, but I appreciate so much the journey and what you're doing. So thank you for telling us that. That's incredible. Okay. What are you excited about today? What are you excited about today and the future going forward, and what you're doing with the agency and your team and the work you're doing?
Yeah, so a few years ago, the government Congress passed an act called the Integrated Digital Experience Act. And within that act is basically, it tells all these federal agencies how to modernize their websites. So, obvious things like improve accessibility, they have to be accessible, they have to work on mobile, they have to have like good search, people should be able to find content there. They also need to be based on user research and user needs. So they're all logical things within public sector, and so I'm really excited about that being something that initiates or triggers a lot of the work that I've been doing for the last couple of years. And so the last few years, I've been working on a web modernization project with NASA. It exists for a couple of reasons. It exists, one, because of that IDEA Act. It also exists because NASA has a couple thousand websites, and they don't want there to be a couple thousand websites. They want all that information in one website. So we've been doing a lot of work with them. That started back in kind of mid 2000, late 2000. And it started with, hey, what CMS should NASA be using for its main, for its major web properties? And so I spent a year taking a look at the landscape of, of all the available CMSs that are out there, Drupal, SortSite, Adobe Experience Manager, and then some newer ones like Wagtail. And then we even took a look at, some of the software as a service type solutions like Contentful, and just trying to understand the pros and cons of Alda. So we spent a year taking a look at this CMS landscape and acquiring data for it, acquiring evidence of it. And while in my heart, being a WordPress guy, I knew WordPress makes a lot of sense here. It's still, there was a lot of benefit for me to kind of take a look at like what, all the driving factors for making a decision like that were. And at the end of it, WordPress was the solution, the CMS that NASA wanted to invest in for the future, and that's what we've been working on for the last couple of years. So for the last couple of years, we've been working on a couple of big NASA WordPress projects, and a lot of bespoke. I talked a lot about how I've been using WordPress in a no-code kind of way. This is not a no-code kind of way. There is a lot of Gutenberg custom development here. It's the project that has everything, like an emphasis on SEO, an emphasis on accessibility. There's a new atomic design system that was created for this, and so seeing the marriage of an atomic design system and Gutenberg, come to bring all that stuff to life has been really, really exciting. And I'm excited to for people interested in NASA, what NASA is up to, and people interested in WordPress to see the fruits of all this labor that we've been working on for the last couple of years, and it's all coming in the next few months. And yeah, so I'm really excited to share that with you and share that with other people in the community.
Yeah, that's excellent. So I want to take just a minute and sidebar, because you did this whole year, one of seeing what's out there, seeing what the options are. And I love that you've done some deep research for a big organization trying to make a big, important decision on it. I'm just curious, what were a couple of takeaways as you just surveyed the landscape? We love WordPress. We understand, we support WordPress, but we know that there's a lot of stuff out there. But I'm curious, what did the landscape look like? What were some of the things you saw when you looked at the other platforms? You mentioned like Wagtail. I hadn't heard that one before. I've heard of Contentful, for instance, and of course Drupal. But what were a couple of the takeaways on that year of investigation out there?
So I would say that there were two major, maybe three major differentiators that separated WordPress from the rest of the CMS pack, if you will. There's a lot of great content management systems out there. They all do the same thing, or try to do the same. They try to make it easy for people to publish information onto the web and make it easy for others to consume it. But the differentiators from WordPress versus the other CMSs that we were looking at were, number one, it had a lot to do with the ecosystem. WordPress was the only CMS that had real-time analysis tools around SEO, and accessibilities to kind of try to improve those situations before the point of publishing. So Yoast is the obvious example. So Yoast, we've all been exposed to Yoast. Yoast allows the content creator user to be authoring and editing content and getting some real-time analysis about how SEO friendly or SEO compatible, whatever the term you want to use it is, before the point of publish. There's accessibility tools out there that do the same things, that are kind of integrated within the WordPress admin, WordPress dashboard, that allow that content creator user to, when it's in draft format, to analyze, do I have accessible content that I'm about to publish and that I'm here and make live. Other CMSs didn't have that baked in. There's WordPress plugins that do these things. We even have the ability to prevent publishing until certain accessibility thresholds and SEO optimization thresholds are met. That was really, really attractive. The majority of the other solutions are, you publish it first, it's live, and then you can go back and check it, and then you kind of have to retrofit it. I've been working in enterprises enough to know that doesn't happen. Once it's published, once it's out there, people are generally going to move on. They're not going to do the analysis of all right, how do I go back and improve this thing? So you really got to catch those things early and often. Upfront in the content publishing lifecycle. So that was one of the big differentiators, was that, and that, again, that's all a product of the WordPress ecosystem and the innovation that comes out of that ecosystem. The other one was just kind of like the resources around this. So we all, you can take for a grain of salt, the whole thing about WordPress powers 40% of the web, that kind of stuff. But there is some byproduct to that, and that is there's a lot of people using it. There's a lot of people building it. There's a lot of people developing on it. There's a lot of people extending on it. There's a lot of knowledge being shared around that. One of the things I did was I went into Stack Overflow and compared WordPress with other CMSs and just being like, how many conversations are happening around this thing, that we're looking at? And it was, what you expected. The ability for, to be able to try to solve a problem by interfacing or sponging up knowledge that was already contributed back in some way, via Stack Overflow or, other places on the web, other groups, Slack channels, etc. That exists in WordPress in a way that it doesn't exist in these other, CMS products. If you want to get developer knowledge around Adobe Experience Manager, for the most part, there are some Adobe Experience Manager specialists out there, but for the most part, you got to go to Adobe for it. Same thing with SortSite. There's not a huge community of SortSite developers out there. So for a place like NASA, resource acquisition becomes a problem. Like where are they going to find talent for that?
Yep.
And again, WordPress, kind of is head and shoulders above the rest in that area. And that this whole concept of WordPress is for everyone too. Like that rang true in all this research too. Like it's more than just developer communities. There's user communities out there that are also sharing their knowledge here. There's all these kinds of there's solutions for learning WordPress that are provided by the communities and promotional companies with the community that add a lot of value within the ecosystem. So it's not just like the software ecosystem, but it's like, the kind of service ecosystem too that exists within WordPress. And then honestly, portability matters too. There's for the most part, I really just wanted public sector to adopt open source. That's the first decision I want them to do is just make an open source decision, and then you've done that, you're in a better place than picking a commercial, bespoke solution. And then once you get past that hurdle, there the obvious open source CMS candidates exist, and the user experience of WordPress and that whole concept of WordPress being for everyone and being considering everyone depending on who you are really rings true and is a differentiator as well.
Well, that's excellent. And that rings true. I'm curious because as I talk to more enterprise agencies, all of you out there in the world interfacing with clients, with their needs, what they actually are trying to get done, that's really, really great to hear. And it's reflective of the community. I think sometimes I've been in the community like you as long as we have. I take some of those things for granted. So I think that's excellent. Well, JJ, thanks so much for the time today. I know you just got back from a big trip and you've got work to pile out, but I appreciate you coming on the podcast and sharing your agency journey. And I look forward to our next conversation, sharing the good work you're doing with WordPress in our world.
I look forward to that too, Cory. Thanks for having me.
All right. Thanks everybody for being here today. And we'll talk to you. We'll talk to you. We'll hear from you. They'll listen to us soon.